Welcome in, everybody, to the Lastella Report, Bleacher Brothers Sports Network. We've got a returning guest this time of year. No one else better to talk to than the associate editor of D1 Softball, Justin McLeod. Justin, thanks for joining us. The NCAA softball tournament is here. How's it going for you?
It's busy, but it's great. It's the best time of the year, right?
Indeed, it is. People like this are always debating how college sports formats should be. I think basketball and softball got it down right. We got action coming up this weekend, pretty much 24/7 over the next couple days. Starting off, obviously FAU second year. Mid-major for them. We'll get to them. We'll get to the Gainesville Regional. But Justin, for the people who don't know about D1 softball and what you do, what's a little bit about you and D1 softball?
Sure, I appreciate that. We do a little bit of everything in college softball. It's kind of funny this week. We were just talking about it. We'll have previews of all 16 regionals. At the same time, we've got coaching transactions in the transfer portal going on. At the same time, we've got some feature stories on some different athletes and coaches and things like that. We like to say we're the one-stop shop. We've got our live scoreboard, and we just had folks on site at different conference tournaments last week. So we like to say we're the one-stop shop for everything in Division I softball. Got a little bit of everything, a little bit of something for every softball fan. This is my second season at D1, 14th season covering college softball, and still having fun.
That's the most important part of it. Yeah, and I've been keeping up the coverage of the rankings all year. You guys do a good job with that, recognizing different schools. It's not just the same bunch. So, but speaking of what the regionals and everything, obviously, our focus on this episode will be the Gainesville and FAU a little bit. So we'll start there. Obviously, FAU headed back there for the second year in a row. UF hosting for at probably many consecutive years, and some newcomers as well in Mercer and Georgia Tech. Overall, with the Gainesville Regional, before we get into FAU specific, what's your thoughts on the pod as a whole?
I think it's actually a really interesting group. There's a lot of familiarity there. FAU, you mentioned last time they were in the regionals last year. They played in Gainesville. The last time Georgia Tech was in the regional 2-3 years ago was also in the Gainesville region. So both schools, FAU and Georgia Tech, they know their way around Gainesville. They know things like that. And then Mercer's head coach, Lindsey Fico, actually played at Florida for Tim Walton. So there's a lot of familiarity, a lot of crossover. Even Georgia Tech's pitching coach, Aaron Dixon, was Kara Hammock's pitching coach at UNCW. Hammock is now on Florida's roster. So there's a lot of connections. There's a lot of those. It's not just you're going to watch film. It's going to be the first time you hear about it. Like, there's a lot of connections in there between the four schools. Obviously, some of them have played each other. Georgia Tech and Mercer have played each other already this year. So I think that makes this regional even more interesting because it's not just four random teams. It's not just teams flying in from different parts of the country. Like these are four teams who, even if they haven't played each other, know one another well. The personnel know one another well. I saw some photos actually, I think on social media of a couple of FAU players and a couple of Mercer players that played travel ball together at like 10U, 12U. So there's a lot of familiarity between these four teams, and I think that just adds a little extra dimension to the regional as a whole.
FAU assistant Elizabeth Hightower, former Gator as well. It's going to be the Owls host family this weekend. So connections all around. But looking at Georgia Tech first, obviously they played in a pretty tough conference this year with FSU and Clemson, both having good years. I'm sure other teams as well. But what made Georgia Tech, in your opinion, stand out as an at-large team, and what is there to know about them heading into this game?
They certainly picked up a couple of major RPI wins early in the year, beating Auburn and Stanford at the beginning of conference play on the ladder. That certainly buoyed their bubble chances from the beginning. Georgia Tech definitely improved year over year. They've always been kind of a hard hitting bunch. Their offensive numbers are a little different this year, but they're still a hard hitting bunch with some real power and some real pop on the offensive side. Sophia Voiles to me is their key this year. That's their ace in the circle. I actually covered Georgia Tech when they played Mercer in midweek. Mercer beat them in Atlanta. Voiles didn't pitch. Not that Voiles pitching would have changed that result by any stretch, but just an extra indicator of how important Voiles is to Georgia Tech and where her presence or absence maybe played in some through the course of the year. She's key for them. I think this regional, the pitching is going to be key, and I think Voiles is going to be key for Georgia Tech. Tech was a solid team this year. I mean, not super spectacular, but gritty, got the job done, won the games they needed to. Kept a decently high RPI for most of the year, lost a couple of series down the stretch, kind of pushed that RPI back a little bit, ended up putting them in the last four in for the tournament. But I think Georgia Tech's a pretty solid bunch. They can get things done on both sides of the ball, but Boyles is their ticket.
We heard Coach Clark already. She already knew about her when she was addressing the team. But UF is obviously going to be the on paper favorite in this series. I caught up with them last year, saw them how dominating they were in person. I'm assuming that's been the same this year, earning the number 3 seed and all that. What's been working for Florida, and are they as dominant as usual?
Their offense absolutely is as good as advertised and as good as it has been. Matter of fact, it might be better. They added Taylor Shoemaker, freshman right fielder, probable / possible, I guess, freshman of the year candidate national or favorite nationally. She's very good. One of the sweetest swings I've seen in a long time. But the offense actually might be better with an addition like Shoemaker in there. Kinley Cahalan at the hot corner has been good. Mia Williams has had a career renaissance year at second base. So the offense is as good as advertised at Florida. The pitching has taken a little bit of a hit. Keegan Rothrock missed some time with injury, and then in coming back from that injury, wasn't as dominant. She had to have some shorter outings, wasn't as great in some of her outings. So the pitching has been a little more of an issue for Florida this year. Rothrock's gotten hit some. The midweek they played against Florida State, I believe it was 4-0. She gave up all 4 runs. Now, 4 runs with a team with an offense like Florida behind you, normally not a problem. That night, it was a problem, but Rothrock's had to work back a little slowly. The last couple of weeks of the season, she looks pretty close to her old self, and the last couple of weeks of the regular season. Pitching, as I mentioned, I think is going to be key in this regional, and that's one reason why is I don't think Florida's pitching is as dominant as they've been in the past. Caitlin Oxley, freshman, she missed the first few weeks of the season with an injury herself. Rothrock's was midseason. So Oxley starts the year injured, kind of gimpy, so to speak, ends up not pitching. I believe I think she had 4 appearances by the time she got to the start of conference play. And Rothrock was hurt at that point. So Oxley's been solid, but she's a freshman who started the year late. So she's had bumps in the road. Ava Brown's a solid Saturday night starter, has also hit her bumps in the road. So I think pitching is going to be key in this regional, and the fact that Florida's pitching has not been as dominant, I think is an extra buoyance to that.
That's interesting because that was another thing that Jordan Clark mentioned. She didn't dive into specifics, but she mentioned that Florida's had some bumps in the road this year, whereas last year they were a little bit more solid. So that's something to keep an eye on, definitely. And with Mercer, we saw last year, we saw FGCU and South Alabama both pick up wins. Is Mercer a team that can come in here and be scrappy and potentially, make some noise?
Oh yeah, Mercer's a solid bunch. They're a scrappy bunch. One of my favorite stats this year, actually. So I mentioned I was there when Mercer beat Georgia Tech, and I did post game with Mercer's coach Lindsay Fico, and she mentioned on that post game that her team had beaten every team in the state of Georgia that they played. They had beaten all the in-state teams. They had one left, and it was the University of Georgia, obviously the biggest one on the dartboard. So, but at that point, they'd beaten all of them. They were playing Georgia the next week, and she's like, we've beaten all the ones we've played. Got Georgia next week, whatever. Well, what does Mercer do? They go into Georgia the next week and they beat Georgia as well. In the conference tournament, Mercer beat all but one team. They beat 6 different teams in the conference tournament. That's really hard to win in the tournament's one thing, but doing that's really hard to do. Mercer's a solid bunch. They're a scrappy bunch. They're not afraid to play anybody, so they're not afraid of the name on the front of the jersey or the stud in the circle or the stud in the lineup kind of thing. They just play really solid. When they're playing well, they play really solid fundamental softball. Their offense has looked really solid, and that's been a big piece of their success when they've had success this year. And you've got a couple of Florida State alums on staff that I think have been part of that as well, and Devin Flaherty and Kaylee Harding. But Mercer is absolutely the kind of team that can come from a 4 seed and make some noise and make some people uncomfortable.
Well, if they've got Florida State ties, they'll definitely have some fans rooting for them in the Gainesville Regional for sure. But shifting gears to FAU, they're back here and they've made some adjustments since last year. Didn't lose anybody except to graduation. They were able to retain all that they were should, and so between obviously the hitting additions of Chloe Yates, Bella Foran, and Autumn Courtney in the circle, do you think there's a chance the result is a little bit different than last year's 2 and DQ in Gainesville?
Oh, I absolutely think that's at least the likelihood. I mean, I'm not going to say anything's impossible, but I think looking at this FAU team, I would certainly be surprised to see that. I think the two biggest things for me, you mentioned Autumn Courtney. Obviously, she's been so consistent and so key for them. But at the same time, everybody knows you're going to get Autumn Courtney if FAU wants to win. Like that's everybody's assumption is Courtney's going to pilot them there. The secondary pitching for FAU the last few weeks has been pretty solid. Jaden Martinez looked pretty good in her last few outings, and Ainsley Lambert, right? So I think the pitching staff as a whole, being as strong as they were the last stretch of the regular season, is going to be super key. And then I love, and I mentioned this on a couple of podcasts I've done, and I think I've mentioned it already today. I love the multidimensional aspect of FAU's offense. When Jordan Clark first got there, the bombs over palms was the slogan or the emoji phrase or whatever it was. I remember seeing it on social media, right? But this is not a team that just hits home runs. They can hit home runs plenty. But the fact that they can hit doubles, they can play small ball, they can load the bases, they've got good eyes at the plate and take walks. Like the multidimensional aspect of the offense, to me is honestly, with no slight to Autumn Courtney at all, that to me is the biggest piece of FAU success this year, because I think that's a new added dimension, and I think it's really paid off.
She had Jordan had a group of FAU supporters who came to her when she was first hired, and they said they want doubles and home runs, no bunting, and that's where I have to assume that's where the bombs over palms came from. But you're right; they've definitely changed things up and became really diverse. With what you've seen from Autumn, do you think she has what in her repertoire to slow down a UF lineup? She's faced some big schools. I believe she started against Clemson this year, and maybe Ole Miss as well. I'm not off the top of my head, but do you think with what you've seen from her, is that a matchup that she'll be able to handle her own in?
I absolutely think the possibility of that is there. Like I say, I don't ever want to speak in absolutes, but I think I like the matchup in the sense of I think the first couple of times through the order, it's very possible you're talking about both teams trying to scratch out a run. I think that's reasonable. My thing is I'm curious what's going to happen within the team like Florida with the athletes they have. What happens the second or third time through the lineup, right? That's kind of the eternal okay, what if or what when maybe. But I do think Autumn Courtney and what I've seen from her and what she's done this year and the performances she's put together, I do think she's got the stuff to be able to go to battle against a Florida and hold her own. Like I'm not going to sit here and say I think she throws a shutout and FAU upsets Florida or anything like that. It could happen. It could absolutely happen. But the one thing I am very confident in is that she can go into that matchup and truly hold her own against even an offense like Florida's.
And looking at FAU's matchup with Georgia Tech specifically, obviously FAU struggled with Annika Anderson, and looking back to last year, they had some struggles with dominant pitching as well. What's the key for them to breaking through from their postseason struggles against Voiles, who's had some success, high strikeout to walk ratio?
I think the two biggest things for me are they've got to take advantage of the opportunities they're given, first of all. I think about a couple. FAU didn't lose a lot of games this year, but I know a couple of the games they lost, they had 10, 12 hits, just couldn't bring runs in. I think I go back to UCF and maybe even FIU in that one, if memory serves. So I think taking advantage of the opportunities they have, taking advantage of the runners when they get on base and being able to bring them around, I think that's super key. And then I think, too, jumping on Georgia Tech early is key. Being able to ride the momentum. Like I know there was for most of the year, FAU really liked the whole coming from behind thing. Probably gave Jordan Clark and her staff some extra heart palpitations there. But I think jumping on top of a Georgia Tech, jumping in early is super key. In a regional in the postseason where one win puts you, a loss, or excuse me, one loss puts you one more loss away from going home, where the stakes are that high. I think jumping on them early, getting the momentum is the second key that I think will be super important for FAU against Georgia Tech and then against whoever they play on Saturday.
That's going to be something to watch for sure. And kind of looking overall with FAU for fans who may not be specifically understanding the whole landscape of college softball. 2 straight years with an at-large bid. It took Clark only 3 years to really build this thing into what it is. What is that? Is that process kind of surprising to you? Or is it normal for mid majors to be able to kind of build something like that?
Neither, to be honest. It's not normal. It's not normal at all. It's not normal to be able to pull it off to this level of success. It's especially not normal to be able to do it in such a short period of time. But as I've gotten to watch Jordan Clark, and I've even gotten to know Jordan Clark a little bit, it also doesn't surprise me. The thing that I look at it, you've got a mix. This year's team, you have two returning starters, and they're both on the left side of the infield, and Jessiana Moore and Kylie Chanel. That's the only returning starters. And I look at this team, and I think we've all largely glazed over that in large part because FAU looked as good as they did last year. Transfer catcher, natural shortstop playing first base, a revolving door at first base just to get the hot hand at bats, freshman at second base, freshman in left field, transfer in right field, the fourth outfielder from last year is the starting center fielder. I think we've all kind of glazed over that, and I'm as guilty of it as anybody. But when I look at that, that itself is hard to do because you took a team last year full of old players. Let's just be honest: grad seniors, regular seniors, a huge graduating class. You took a bunch of old players, and you now are having the same success with a group of young players, freshmen, transfers with multiple years left, things like that. So there again, it's not normal, but it also doesn't surprise me. And I think that's the piece of it. Like this kind of thing, mid majors getting an at-large bid to the NCAA tournament, not rare necessarily, but not super common. I mean, this year FAU was the only mid major to get an at-large bid. All the rest of the at-large bid went to Power Four teams. It happens. It's not like it doesn't ever happen. But getting an at-large bid 2 years in a row as a mid-major is really, really tough to do. And I think that speaks to Clark. I think that speaks to the team dynamic. I think it speaks to what they did this year. But it's definitely not normal. And FAU fans may not realize how abnormal it is, but they've got something pretty special there to be able to pull that off.
I'm glad you say that. But the fans are growing for sure. The fan base, they're building the outfield paradise deck that they had out there. That was they had a DJ out there, so people are starting to notice. But with anything, it takes time. So, but kind of looking at the tournament as a whole, in terms of potential upsets, is there any region that pops out to you as this is a chance where the top seed might not make it out?
I mean, I think there's probably a few. I look at an Arizona that's hosting Ole Miss, obviously an Ole Miss team that FAU knows well from the opening week of the season. Ole Miss has had a really solid year. Their offense has turned around. They've got some good pitching. I look at an LSU hosting Jordy Ball in Nebraska. I look at Alabama hosting Virginia Tech, a Hokies team that loves the home run ball. They hit a lot of them. I think there's probably a handful of different regionals where when I look, I'm like, okay, well, I could see the 2 seed beating the 1 seed, maybe even the 3 seed. And I'll give you one that I don't know is probably a popular opinion, but I do think it could be interesting is Mississippi State out in Lubbock at Texas Tech. Like Nyjah Kennedy's there. We all know how good Nyjah is, how good Texas Tech is with Nyjah. But that is a Mississippi State team that beat Nyjah and Texas Tech in opening week. And it's a Mississippi State team that's very familiar with Nyjah Kennedy from even the regional last year when she was still at Stanford. So that one's not necessarily as hot on paper in terms of possible upset, but that's one where I look at that Mississippi State team, and if anybody was going to have a chance to upset a Nyjah-led Texas Tech, I think it could be the Bulldogs.
You mentioned Texas Tech, and I feel like that's like kind of at least been the first really national example of use of NIL with Kennedy and pretty much the whole team from Louisiana. It seemed like a lot of additions. do you feel like that could potentially become a bit of a new normal in college softball, or do you think that was just maybe a bit of an anomaly with how much money Texas Tech has? We see it spread over to all their sports.
I think it's more of an anomaly than the new norm, to be honest. I mean, you're still going to have. I mean, in the age of rev share, what does NIL look like? How does like all those questions that we all really don't know the answer to really until it happens? Let's just be honest.
Yeah.
But I think that's definitely more the anomaly. You're going to have some players and even some teams that do take advantage of NIL and do gain from it. But I absolutely think Texas Tech, Nija's deal, the other deals out there, I definitely think that's more of an anomaly than the new norm.
We gotta hope so. Another thing I wanted to pick your brain about the 400-mile rule.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, we've seen some. I've seen some outrage from the Boston coach on social media. They're tired of going to Oklahoma. And I mean, if Jordan keeps having success, I don't think she's not a Gators fan. She's gonna want to get out of Gainesville eventually. What is the reasoning for that rule, and is there any chance that changes, or is that something that's set in stone?
So the basic reasoning of it is it's a money saving thing. It's been there for a long time with the NCAA. It's when a team's close, if they're within the 400 miles, the guidance is you have to bus them there versus paying for what could end up being, what is the math, 48 flights. So that's kind of where it originates. Been there forever. Never been the most popular thing, but as the sport of softball has grown, it's become less popular because, okay, well, we have the product to not have to just worry about pinching pennies. Like, that's really what it boils down to is the product just good enough? We don't have to worry about pinching every penny. Let's fly some teams places to make it more of a fair, balanced bracket. The way that ends is, at least in part, is seeding the top 32 teams in the NCAA tournament. Right now, you have the top 16 seeds, 1 through 16. That's who hosts. But the 2 seeds at each of those locations is not determined by 17 to 32.
Mm.
It's determined first by the busing rule you're talking about. So, for instance, FAU to Florida would make you think if you went 1 to 32 that FAU was the 30th team. That might be true, but they're not there because they're 30. They're there because they can bust to Gainesville. Last year, or the projection was UCF this year could be the number 2 to Gainesville, and FAU could be the number 3. That wouldn't be because UCF was the number 30 and FAU was the wherever math works out. I was a words guy, not a numbers guy. It would have been because UCF and FAU could both have bust. So when you go to the point of soccer and volleyball have both tested the seeding 32 thing in their postseason and received positive reviews. Softball hasn't gotten to that point yet. But when that time comes, you see 32. Well, then if FAU ends up in Gainesville, it's because they're the number 30 and Florida's the number 3. The team that plays the number 2 seed is the number 2 seed at the number 16 seeds regional. It's because they were 17 in the rankings and just missed hosting themselves. And then you get a much more balanced bracket in your top 2 seeds. And then your 3 and 4 seeds kind of go from there. Will some still bust? Absolutely. But you have more fluidity. Because right now, think about the projection of had UCF and FAU both gone to Gainesville, they were 1 spot behind each other in the RPI, yet both could have ended up at the same regional. Now you take that, once you get to the point of seeding 32, we're not there yet, and hopefully we do get there, but once you get to that point, that comes off the table now. And if 3 and 4 you still have some busing, it's a different animal. The thing you mentioned with Boston's coach, there's also the point of, for her, like, they're flying every year, but they're flying to the same part of the country. And it's not because that's the only part of the country that hosts regionals. It's in part, not fully, but in part, it's because how many 4 seeds do you have busing? For instance, if the SWAC champion every year is in the state of Texas, they're probably going to bus to Texas or Texas A&M, and all of a sudden the 4 seed at Texas and Texas A&M's regional every year is taken every year because that's so close. Or, in Georgia, for instance, or Alabama or something like that, if there's a team that's close, they're busing there. So that's not an option for the flight. And all of a sudden 16 4 seeds becomes how many 4 seeds? So the busing has been around for a long time. It's become increasingly less popular the last couple of years, last 5 years, since COVID and since kind of the effects of COVID have started to wear off. But then it also has those effects like what Boston's coach is talking about, where they don't bus, but they feel the effects of the busing rule And so I think that that's some of the things that are also going to eventually force that rule to at least be adapted, if not change.
Yeah, no, they did that. They did them so wrong. They made it seem like they didn't like want to play Oklahoma, but I mean, they just don't want to go there. I feel them. I'm sure, like I said, I'm sure FAU will get tired of that too. But rounded down here, if there's only one regional that a fan can watch this weekend, which one are you saying to tune into? Putting you on the spot with that one.
You are putting me on the spot with that one. I'll give my reason for why. I'm actually going to say the Texas Tech regional. And the reason why, you've got one of the sport's biggest stars in Najee Kennedy. You have three teams in Texas Tech, Mississippi State, and Washington as the top three seeds that all fit very different bills, but all have some real talent on there. All come from different parts of the country, different conferences. I just kind of like the group of what's there out in Lubbock, and I think you could get some good games too. Seeing that those competitors and that level of competition at its best. There are several. If you'd given me 16 options, I would have given you 16 answers. But I'll go there if you're going to give me just one.
I'm sure, and that's why you said you have seven screens. You can't miss any action. I'm not going to make you predict a champion right now. There's too much going on for that. But is there a chance that it's not a favorite? It's not a Texas A&M, for example. Is there a chance we see a surprise champion this year?
Absolutely. I think you could see the regional. I think you could see 5 or 6 regionals this week where the seeded team does not come out of them. And I think the World Series field could be. I think there's probably 20 teams that legitimately have a shot at making the World Series. 25 maybe, if the cards fall right. And when you have that level, and based on the matchups and all that, like anything can happen once you get to Oklahoma City. I think the favorites are going to stay the favorites, but there's absolutely a long list of those who at least have the chance at it.
Justin, we thank you for taking some time today to hop on. Where can the people find your coverage of the upcoming rounds to see what you're putting out?
For sure. All of our regional, super regional World Series previews, all of our centrals, and everything else we got going on. D1 Softball on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and then d1softball.com.
You heard him right there, folks. Make sure to lock in. He'll get you right for all your softball coverage. Thank you so much, folks, for tuning in to this edition of the Lastella Report. Justin McLeod. I'm Robbie Lastella, and make sure to tune in to the Gainesville Regional this weekend to see some Owl softball. We'll see you next time.